So I think as Sir said very correctly, that this is a very important kind of a short case topic which can actually make or break your exam. It's very important and it's a very easy thing to do if you do it correctly. So we'll have two talks. One would be more of an examination. Second presentation would be where I am combining an examination with a case of a deformity, which normally is present or is normally given as a case. So without wasting much more time, so for the foot and ankle, I think we always have to think on your feet according to what you find. Foot and ankle complex is made up of 28 bones, 33 joints, 57 articular surfaces, ligaments, muscles, and anatomically it's divided into hind foot, midfoot, and forefoot. These are three different parts which work synergistically to form an organ. That's what I would call it as, like a foot complex, which works like a marvel where we are walking on 2 feet. So one thing for sure, hind foot is not only the ankle, because hind foot also has a very important subtalar joint which moves in the coronal plane, and all ankle injuries are not sprains. So before we start, and before you start your foot and ankle case or examination, you have to listen to the patient. That's very important, that you keep quiet and you listen. So in history, it can be acute or chronic. It can be traumatic, congenital, infective, inflammatory, neoplastic, or degenerative. Sometimes it can be chondral type of a pain. What is the deformity, neuromuscular things. So it's very important that you listen to the patient and ask pertinent questions. When you come, when you've taken the history, then you come to inspection, where you need to expose the patient at least up to the knees, get both the shoes off and socks off, at least have the trousers rolled up to the knees. Take general cues from age of the patient, whether there's an obvious rheumatoid disease, whether the patient is walking with any aids like a walker or a stick. Examine the shoes of the patient. They are very important, and they can earn you some extra points or marks in front of the examiner if you examine the shoes, if he has any raise, if there are any insoles in it, if there are any uneven wear of the shoes especially. And look for the deformity, like which is obvious in the foot, which kind of a deformity, and we'll be describing that subsequently. So you can see the deformity and you need to describe it correctly. Ask the patient to walk and always see him from the front, from the sides, from the back. Obvious gaits in the feet are high stepping gait, which is of equinovarus, and in foot drop. There will be an obvious antalgic gait if there is any arthritis or any deformity which is causing the wear and tear, like ankle or hindfoot or midfoot pain. Sometimes in forefoot pain, there can be a short propulsive phase where, instead of you normal rocker and kind of pushing off, there would be shortened push off, and that is a short propulsive phase. When you look or when you go on to further inspection, patient facing you and from behind, check for limb alignment, especially the knees, because limb alignment is obviously a very important part of the examination. uh,
Yeah, we have lost briefly. You can please start
so
again.
I was muted.
Acha. Okay.
So can I continue, sir?
Yeah, yeah, please, please.
So as you continue on to inspection, check for limb alignment, especially the knees, which are genu valgus
Please
are
share
associated.
your screen, Abhishek. Share, please.
Can
Yeah,
you
yeah, we can see it. Please, please proceed here.
So whether it is uh, whether it is like check for the limb alignment, whether it is genu valgus, which is associated with flat feet or not. Look for different foot shapes and positions. Look for the medial arch, which is obviously obliterated in a pes planus or exaggerated in pes cavus. So when you see a pes cavus, always look for lower back or for signs of any spina bifida or neurofibromatosis or something of other spinal anomalies which can present as foot deformities. Further to inspection, check for check for the alignment from the back, check for too many toes sign, which normally should be, normally 3 toes are seen if you look from behind, but anything more than 3 is considered as more planovalgus or pes planus, and they are called too many toes sign. Next, you also have to look for any calf wasting if there is on one side more than the other. When the patient is seated in front of you, look for skin ulcers, hairlessness, which is a sign of non-nutrition or something like this, or calluses which are seen, muscle wasting, nails, sometimes atrophic conditions can present as nail disorders, swellings like lipomas, other mass occupying lesions can be seen, toe deformities like hallux valgus, claw toes, hammer toes, and also check for soles of the feet which can show calluses. Coming to palpation, ask where is the tender area, where is the painful area, and accordingly proceed. Feel with the back of the hand for temperature differences between the 2 feet. Check for pulses. That's another very important thing that we always miss, especially if you're dealing with any diabetic neuroarthropathy where there can be any vascular involvement also. And always confirm your inspectory findings on palpation. So if you have to go systematically in the hind foot for the ankle, tender areas, look for medial gutter, medial ligamentous complex where you can have anteromedial impingement or bony, or look for anterolateral side, you can look for the syndesmotic injuries, lateral gutter, look for fibula, and go further down and look for any signs and symptoms of the lateral ligamentous complex. That's where is the sinus tarsa, where you will come across more subtalar joint pain and the deformity and arthritis involved with subtalar coronal plane deformities. Coming hindfoot, look back of the ankle, look for posterior ankle or subtalar joint impingement, prominent Cedars process. There is an FHL tendon that comes there at this point. That's the number 2 is the FHL tendon, which is like the lighthouse. Retrocalcaneal bursa and the Hagelands can be painful. Tendo Achilles needs to be palpated for insertion mid substance if there is any gap of chronic rupture. And the Hagelands bump. Palpation on the lateral side will be the distal end of fibula, where you go in from the styloid process of the 5th metatarsal into the cuboid for the peroneals, peroneal tubercle, and sinus tarsi. And so you have to go systematically either from proximal to distal or distal to proximal, and note where the patient is having any pain. Similarly, medially, you can go from the first medial metatarsocuneiform joint, navicular tuberosity, talus head, sustentaculum tali, and the medial malleolus. Very important thing is how do you elicit movements, and there are certain complex movements where both things happen. You always have to describe movement as active and passive, like how much active movement is possible and further how much passive movement is possible. You need to describe the deformities and also make sure that as a rule, if there is a plantar flexion deformity, you cannot have dorsiflexion. So you need to describe it as X number of plantar flexion deformity, further free plantar flexion of this much. So that sentence, the more you practice, the more you will get perfect. And that's very important. So you should know how much is a normal ankle dorsiflexion and how much is normal plantar flexion. Those things are important. You need to assess for gastrocnemius and soleus tightness with knees extended and knee flex. That's the Silver-Skjold's test, which we'll be telling you later. Subtalar movement, it's a very important movement and very commonly asked by examiner to demonstrate a subtalar movement. You can do it in multiple ways. One is making the patient prone and then eliciting it in this manner, where you confirm, where you hold the talar head and neck and move the subtalar joint by holding the calcaneum with your thumb and the index finger. Similarly, you can do it in patient in prone in supine position by dorsiflexing the foot, locking the talus in the ankle mortise, and then moving it subtalar joint. So both ways you can do it, but you have to make sure that you have locked the talus or you have negated the talar movement in the ankle mortise. Next important thing is muscle power, especially in a neuromuscular diseases where you are planning for tendon transfers or things like that. The dorsiflexors are tibialis anterior, the plantar flexor is tendoachilles. Similarly, inverters and everters are the tib post, and the everters are the peroneal. So these are basic up, down, in and out movements that you need to examine and grade the powers of these muscles, because they are going to help you plan your tendon transfers. So after inspection, palpation, in palpation, range of movement and muscle powers are very important. Lastly, special tests like for ankle stability is the anterior drawers test. They are used to determine the anterior talofibular, that's the low ankle ligament test. A positive test happens when your ankle slides forward or makes a clunking sound as it reaches the end point. Similarly, Taylor test for calcaneofibular ligament is inversion test, is when you kind of invert and you see a gap opening up, or you feel the ankle moving more as compared to the opposite side. This is a Kleiger's test for deltoid and syndesmotic instability, where it's a plantar flexion external rotation test, and it's used to check for syndesmosis and deltoid. These are more multiligamentous sports injuries, may not be important in deformities of foot and ankle, but they're important for you to know. Similar syndesmotic is the squeeze test or the fibular draw, where the fibula can be pushed slightly posterior as compared to the opposite side normal test. So Thompson test is for Achilles ruptures. When you squeeze the calf, there is no plantar flexion, which otherwise is normally seen if there is an intact tendo-Achilles. And the Hageland's bump. These are the things. Lastly, the spine examination and neurological examination. If you're dealing with neuromuscular dystrophy or some neurological disorder which is kind of causing this from the spine, it's important that you should know which area there is decreased sensations. Again, very important for you to complete your examination and score some points where you've not missed on other things. Next, coming to imaging, it's important that we do X-rays in standing position, and this is how you kind of unearth or open up the deformities of the foot and ankle by taking standing X-rays. So these would be the basic X-rays. Similarly, you can do ultrasound and MRIs. Any questions till now, or should I go and show something else? The other second presentation, sir.
Yeah, any question from PG?
So I'll just finish the other part also, sir. So
Yeah, please.
we can then continue.
Then they can have discussion. Yeah, thank you.
So this is what, so the first talk was more about the examination, what we see and how one should do it. I think that all things are given very well in books, but this is, I think, where we can discuss and how ideally it should be done. Say like, this is a plano-valgoid foot, which can come as a short case, and how we go about it. So as you know, foot is a complex. It has a structure, bones, muscles, which kind of pull and push the structure, and which together gives you the function. So disclaimer before anything, for a flat foot, arch height is variable in population. A low arch is not pathologic. There is a wide variation. A flat foot should be referred as an abnormal loss of arch with pain. So painful flat foot is a pathology. Non-painful flat foot or asymptomatic flat foot can be a physiologic flat foot. So this flat foot describes the end point of a collapsed medial arch with associated deformities of hind foot and forefoot. So arches of the foot, when we come to flat foot, is an important question in itself. There is a lateral longitudinal arch with fourth and fifth metatarsals and the cuboid and the lateral calcaneum. Medial longitudinal arch, which has the first metatarsal, medial cuneiform, navicular and the talus, and the transverse arches which spans the mid-tarsal joints. As we all know, second and the third metatarsal bases are the keystones of these arches and prevent collapses. So these arches are supported by structures which are static and dynamic. Static is the spring ligament, superficial deltoid and the plantar fascia. And the dynamic arch supports are the tibialis posterior tendon and the extrinsic and intrinsic toe flexors, which are on the plantar side of the foot. So arch, structure and the supports itself is a question. So make sense. As the deformity presents, you have to kind of visualize in your brain, it's a three-dimensional deformity. So in a plano-valgoid foot, the hind foot progresses to valgus and the forefoot supinates to compensate for it, which will be the reverse in a cavovarus foot. In the cavovarus foot, like a CTEV, the hind foot will come in varus and the forefoot will pronate. So if you remember CTEV casting, the first cast is to exaggerate the deformity where you supinate the foot so that the forefoot comes in line with the hind foot. So the deformities are three-dimensional. The three dimensions are the sagittal plane, which is in this plane, axial plane, which is the cross section, and the coronal plane, which is across the malleoli. So in a plano-valgoid foot, coming to our case, the longitudinal arch collapses, the forefoot AB ducts, means goes outwards, and in the coronal plane, the heel goes in valgus. So 3D deformity, if you understand these three planes, it's very easy to describe your deformity which comes in the case, whether it is CTEV or plano-valgoid, whichever ones comes, it will be easy for you to describe it. Now, coming to our case, in history, you need to, from history rather, you need to able to pick up whether the deformity is flexible or rigid. Flexible is more common and painless. Rigid are less frequent but painful. If it is painless, whether it is from any ligamentous laxity with tendoachilles tightness like heel striking foot everts unlocks the subtalar joint and midfoot collapses. In painful flat feet, there is a tarsal coalition or vertical talus or any neurologic or Achilles contracture or like accessory navicular causing this, or any inflammatory subtalar joint. So flexible or rigid, painless or painful. These are all historical, like history-wise points that you should get into. So whether from history, the etiology of the flat foot should come out, whether it is tibialis posterior dysfunction or due to any secondary contractures of the gastrosoleus, whether there is any inflammatory arthritis which is causing it or any malunion of calcaneum or cuboid, whether there is any history of any trauma, any muscle spasms in neuromuscular diseases, whether neuropathic deformity which is severe. In neuromuscular disease, you will find that the first few years of his life, he was walking normally and then it has progressed in his teens. So there are different neuromuscular diseases which have their own natural history. And sometimes coronal plane angulation at the knee, tibia or ankle drives the foot in secondary valgus. So these are all important things. Add to that, the gravity and weight bearing forces encourage destabilization of the midfoot and makes this deformity more progressive. In history, also need to know what is the reason of the visit, whether there is pain or deformity or just the elderly in the family are asking you to go and asking the children to come and see you for what next needs to be done. If painful, the location of pain is important. Onset of the deformity from congenital or recent onset or at what teenage age has it come, whether there is a family history of plano-valgoid foot, whether it's a genetic predisposition or any prior treatment or surgery has been done for such things. If there is pain, you should know what inflammatory arthropathy is there, whether inflammation is along which area, tibialis posterior tendon, whether the deltoid fibers are being stretched. If there is any impingement laterally in a plano-valgoid foot, it is the talocalcaneal impingement which is kind of causing it. Or if there is any arthritic pain, which is whether it is a causative agent of flat foot or end result due to foot going skewed laterally. So in physical examination, check for signs of increased ligamentous laxity like Marfan syndrome. Check for angular deformities of the lower limb like genu valgus, which we've just spoken. Any neurological examination to rule out increased muscle tone or decreased muscle tone in an element type of a lesion. You need to kind of examine it and bring it out in your positive findings. When you check your foot, check for the callosities like how you can see in the picture on the right, whether the tendoachilles is flexible or not. Check with the knee extended and foot inverted so that the dorsiflexion is correctly noted. Check for callus pattern over the medial arch. Subtalar motion, whether it can evert or invert, can be checked. Arch at the rest with toe raise. When you raise the toes, the arch should be formed, like it's because of the windlass mechanism of the plantar fascia. and check for any specific areas of pain on accessory navicular or subtalar inflammatory joint. So visualize the legs from knee down. Observe the heel alignment. As you can see on the picture on the top, the left heel is more valgus as compared to right. Inspect and palpate the course of the tibialis posterior tendon for tenosynovitis. Try and ask them to do a single leg heel raise, which if the patient is unable to invert, that means the posterior tibialis tendon is dysfunctional and the heel is not inverting on your heel raise. Check for inversion eversion muscle power. Check for the gastrosoleus contracture with subtalar joint reduced, and subtalar motion needs to be checked. In early disease, it's supple. In late arthritic disease, it's painful due to arthritis and rigid. So imaging, as we discussed, weight-bearing X-rays are important. Sometimes CT scan and MRI is done to check for correlations or any neurologic reasons where it is done. Importance of weight-bearing X-rays, where we just discussed, and the Saltzman view for hindfoot alignment, it's important. So coming to treatment of flat feet, options are reassurance. The patient is a flexible, non-painful flat foot, or you can try arch supports. Sometimes you have to ask them to stretch the Achilles when the Achilles is contracture. And lastly, rarely, surgery is indicated. So flexible, painless flat feet, majority reassurance and patient education is needed, and Achilles stretching if it is tight. If it is flexible flat feet due to collapse of medial arch and medial skin irritation, arch supports can be suggested. These arch supports need to be customized, and along with that, you need tendo-Achilles stretches, foot intrinsics, and inverter strengthenings. So treatment with chew inserts will not alter eventual foot shape, needs to be explained and counseled to the patient and their parents, because they believe, or they sometimes start believing, that by putting insoles while the child is growing up, you can actually get them arch, you can develop an arch in the patient. So surgical, only when failure of prolonged non-surgical attempts to relieve pain and that interferes with normal activities is when surgical treatment is offered. So what surgical treatment is offered? Normally in a pediatric population where there is forefoot abduction, you need to lengthen the lateral column, try along with tendo-Achilles lengthening. Sometimes medial imbrication or tightening of the talonavicular capsule is done. Calcaneal osteotomy is posterior to the calcaneocuboid joint, and a trapezoid shaped wedge graft is inserted, plus or minus plantar fascia is treated. If peroneus brevis is tight and not allowing you to lengthen the calcaneal osteotomy, you need to peroneus brevis lengthening is done or transferred to the longest tendon. In the forefoot, if there is a drop of the first metatarsal, then you need to do a dorsal wedge opening osteotomy of the cuneiform or the first metatarsal. In a flexible flat feet where there is accessory navicular, or what we call as a os navicular syndrome, you need to excise with advancement of tibialis posterior tendon. That's the Kidner's or modified Kidner's procedure is done. And in tarsal coalition or in rigid painful flat feet, tarsal coalition, you need to excise the bar and a soft tissue interposition is done. In neuromuscular imbalance flat feet, you need to do tendon transfers to achieve a plantigrade functional foot. In an adult flat foot, there is divided into 4 stages, 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1 is just tenosynovitis, 2 is dysfunction with inflammation where there is tendinosis and tear. 3 is with subtalar joint arthritis, and 4 is subtalar and ankle arthritis. So stage 1, 3, and 4, the surgical decisions are easier. 1 where there is no deformity is primarily conservative. Stage 3 and 4 where there is rigid deformity, arthritic pain, it's easier to convince patient and the patient comes for surgery. Where you need more of fusion surgery, it's easier, good outcome. Stage 2 is where the patient is also in a dilemma and there are a plethora of treatment options where you need to do flat foot reconstruction, where you need tendon transfer with osteotomies. So before you plan a surgery, you need to know what is the dominant plane of your deformity, whether it is axial, coronal, or sagittal. You also need to check the flexibility of the foot, whether the subtalar joint is correcting or not, whether the first tray is flexible or whether the first tray is stable or unstable, because then you need to stabilize at the midfoot level also. And depending on that, the treatment. So in a stage 1, if it is not treating to normal treatment like conservative line, you can do a tenosynovectomy, we can do it endoscopic or open debridement. In stage 2, where there is flat feet, where dysfunctional of tibialis posterior, you need lateral column lengthening, you can do a distraction and fusion, and medially you need to kind of transfer the FDL, like uh, medially to augment the tibialis posterior with an FDL transfer. You can do multiple options where FDL transfers are done and kind of add with a spring ligament repair. So the flow chart is, if the hind foot is reduced, forefoot reduced, you need, and medial column stable, you need FDL transfer, medial sliding osteotomy with spring ligament repair. If the hind foot is reduced, forefoot is also, but medial column is unstable, that means along with the FDL transfer and calcaneal slide, you need to fuse the medial unstable column, that is tarsometatarsal joint fusion. When the forefoot is abducted, hind foot reduced, medial column stable, you need to add a lateral column lengthening to correct the forefoot abduction. Same, forefoot abducted and medial column unstable, lateral column lengthening with a tarsometatarsal joint fusion. So you need to address the foot as a global pathology laterally and medially and address it properly. So these are some slides for medial calcaneal sliding osteotomy. This is the FDL tendon transfer, where the FDL is transferred onto the tibialis posterior and sewed into kind of make it act like an inverter. This is the spring ligament, which is repaired nowadays with anchors, suture anchors. These are slides for TMT joint fusion, like for first ray instability. And in stage 3 and 4, where there is such grotesque deformities with arthritis, you end up with fusion. So selective fusions is the way forward, whether it is triple arthrodesis or calcaneal cuboid or only posterior subtalar. It depends on which areas of joint, which areas are arthritic and how to go ahead. In stage 4, the option is either, in our country at present, is a pan-talar fusion or a TTC fusion. But outside, you can do a subtalar fusion with an ankle prosthesis, which can give you, which can preserve the ankle dorsiflexion, plantar flexion movement and give them mobility and a better gait to walk. So these are our flat foot patients where they are able to go on tiptoeing after the surgery and an arch is formed. So if you can do it properly, I think it's there. So foot, it's not a joint and the deformity is 3-dimensional. So in a plano valgoid foot, the hind foot is in valgus. There might be some equinus at the ankle because of the tendoachilles contracture, and forefoot is supination. So these are line diagrams. What you need to do is, for the valgus of the hind foot, you need to do a medial calcaneal sliding osteotomy as you've shown over here. Equinus of the ankle, the tight tendoachilles is lengthened. So you see that the gray fibers are lengthened. And for the tibialis posterior dysfunctional, we have added an FDL over here to as an augment to your tibialis posterior. So, and for the forefoot supination, what you do is the Cotton's osteotomy to get the forefoot down. So equinus at the ankle, so you take a midline incision, isolate the sural nerve, resect the muscular tendinous junction, cut the midline raphe, feel a give way, and then close. So that's the equinus. Valgus of the hind foot, you do a calcaneal sliding osteotomy, direct incision, slide the calcaneum, pass a percutaneous screw. This is how it looks like. For tendon transfers to tibialis posterior, posteromedial incision, dissect and isolate the tibialis posterior and the tibialis and the FDL. Isolate the FDL, harvest it before the knot of Henry's and transfer it onto the bone tunnel into the navicular. So the spring ligament comes over here below, and this is how the spring ligament is reefed or reconstructed nowadays with internal brace. And for forefoot supination, this is the cuneiform osteotomy, medial cuneiform osteotomy. You can put in a wedge over here. There are wedge plates which are available, or you can use a tricortical graft with 1 or 2 hole plate on the same thing. So symptomatic flat feet, equinus at the ankle needs lengthening, hind foot valgus needs a medial calcaneal slide, FDL to tip post transfer, and a spring ligament repair or reconstruction, and forefoot supination needs a cuneiform osteotomy. So take home out of this case would be you need to identify the etiology, take proper history, detailed clinical examination, justify your treatment, like why you want to suggest a treatment for this patient. Goal is to get them plantigrade foot on which they can locomotion, on which they can locomote or they can move about. Don't cover our ignorance with just reassurance. Arch supports, if you're giving, give them customized, and surgery when indicated can give good results. So conclude, given the morbidity associated with arthrodesis of joints involved in flat feet, patient should be surgically treated before progression to arthritis, and flat foot reconstruction is an excellent option provided you should know what tendons to or what muscle tendons to play with and which can be transferred, how you can augment it with osteotomies to improve the quality of life of our patients. Thank you, sir.